joke up here.
Never mind.
You know how when you get something stuck in your head, you just can't get rid of it? You know, I say his mother's name incorrectly every time she comes up here. It's like, it's just ingrained and I can't reverse that whole thought process. So I spelled it out phonetically so I don't say this young man's name incorrectly. But anyway, this is the 5:30 show. Our media chef could not make it, but we have something very, very special for you. But first, let me thank some of our sponsors. This is our last show for the season, and you are in the kitchen with Mariano's. It's been a great season. We've had perfect weather, but we won't even think about yesterday. We'll just kind of rewind the tape, splice it out, and just pretend that it never happened. But I'd like to thank the Spanish olive oils from Spain, Pepsi, E&J Gallo Family Vineyards, LaGrue Distribution Systems, CLTV Chicagoland's Television, and I'd like to thank my boss from the city of Chicago, Ivy Hall, and all the people behind the scenes. Sound guy, our sous chef, who's amazing, getting all these chefs just prepared to go on stage live so they can do their shows. So our next chef on stage, ready to start, his name is Chef Rob Hafer, and he is with Takashi, one of the very, very famous, I hear it's to die for restaurants in the city. He can tell you more about it. Let's give him a warm welcome.
Okay, I'm gonna come over here because I don't like hiding back there. But my name is Rob Hafer. I'm from Takashi Restaurant. We're located in Bucktown, right by the corner of Damon and Armitage. We have 3 other restaurants in our family. We have the Slurping Turtle, which is in River North, which is a ramen shop that happened to have just gotten voted one of the 21 best places for noodles in the nation. So that's really good. They didn't put it in order, but we were the first ones on the list. I don't know if that means we're number 1 or number 21, but when you open the page, we were the first ones. Then we also have Tabo Sushi, which is in a New Club Market. I think it's up on Wells Street, right by Rush and Division up there. That's just basically a California sushi maki roll place that's put together by Takashi, who's my boss. And then there's also Noodles by Takashi, which is in the Macy's food court, in the big Macy's right in the middle of downtown. They're only open till 3:30, so if you want to go, you gotta go early. So Takashi has been in Chicago for 7 years now, and 5 years ago, the Michelin Guide came to Chicago, and we were one of the first restaurants in Chicago to receive a Michelin star. Now, if you think about how many restaurants there are in Chicago, thousands upon thousands upon thousands, there are only 23 restaurants in Chicago that have Michelin stars. You can get 1, 2, or 3. We have one. One restaurant in Chicago has 2 right now, and one restaurant in Chicago has 3 right now. Those are Alinea and Graham Elliott, respectively. So I don't know if you've ever heard of those restaurants, but the best of the best fine dining. Now you might wonder why I work at this fancy restaurant, but I'm up here in a t-shirt and gym shoes. Well, at Takashi, we wanted to do really, really approachable fine dining. So you come into our restaurant, all the chefs have black aprons, black hats, and t-shirts. You'll see chef in a chef coat sometimes, and you'll see Takashi in a Pearl Jam shirt sometimes, with just an apron on. Our restaurant's set up kind of in like a tavern atmosphere. You'll sit within 2 or 3 feet from the next person. Sometimes you'll be right next to the next person on like a community table. So we wanted to make that easy approach so that you don't have to be afraid to come in there. When you think about fine dining, you're like, oh, do I have to wear a tie? Do I have to wear dress shoes? So on and so forth. Takashi, you could show up in flip-flops and cargo shorts if you want. I wouldn't, but you could. We wouldn't kick you out. So that being said, we're gonna cook some food today. We're gonna cook some fusion food, which is what we do at Takashi. We are predominantly a French restaurant, but with a man born in Japan, there's a lot of room to add Japanese food to it. But we don't just stop with French and Japanese. We do Italian, which is I'm gonna get into a little bit today. We'll do some foods from Spain, Portugal. We're kind of like a worldly food fusion place. You will see mainly French and Japanese, but we take a little bit of everything and try to put it together to make great food. Today we're going to make soba gnocchi with dayboat scallops, 3 different kinds of mushrooms, peas, and fava beans. I picked all these ingredients because I have little stories to tell just about every ingredient, so I could stretch this out. My chef told me when I came here today that I had to talk constantly for at least a half an hour. So if I stop talking, somebody needs to stand up and ask a question so I can keep talking. Okay? Why you can call what we're doing fusion food is just by the name of it. Soba gnocchi with Parmesan cheese cream sauce. Soba is a Japanese word for buckwheat. Now buckwheat isn't a wheat at all. It's a cereal. It's a grain. But in the mountains of Japan and in the mountains of China, they can't grow wheat. So they grow buckwheat, grind it down into a flour, and they make soba noodles out of it. Now, anybody here had soba noodles before? Cold soba salad, hot soba noodles, and broth, so on and so forth. Soba is the name for buckwheat. Then, gnocchi, it's an Italian name. It means knot or knuckle. And if you look at them, kind of a knot, kind of like a knot in a tree, or a knuckle. Parmesan, obviously it's an Italian word. Cream is actually a French derivative word. So just in the title of the dish, you can see how fused it is with so many different nationalities. Now let's start with talking about gnocchi. Now gnocchi is considered the godfather of all dumplings. So if you've ever had spatzel, if you've ever had Chinese dumplings, if you've ever had gnocchi, if you've ever had chicken in dumplings, they all derive from gnocchi, which comes from the Roman times. It's Middle Eastern, from the Roman times. And basically back then, it was just eggs, flour, and water. And they made these little dumplings. Now in the 16th century, when they finally brought potatoes to Eastern Europe, that's when they started doing potatoes. Now you're hard-pressed to find an actual gnocchi that's not a potato gnocchi.
Mine isn't.
So to say that we're going to use potatoes,
Mine
we have to
isn't.
use a certain kind of potato, and that's what's called a floury potato. Not a new potato or a waxy potato, but a floury potato. Now waxy potatoes are like reds and yellows and whites, like Yukon Gold potatoes. They're waxy. When you cut them in half, you can feel the surface. They're really firm. There's nothing, there's no pores to them or anything like that. They're not grainy. So when you cook them down, they cook down smooth, but they still hold their texture. Now, a russet potato is grainy. You rub your finger across it, you can feel that there's little tiny pieces in there. So this is a floury potato. If we cook this in water for too long, it's going to completely turn to nothing. It's going to be potato water. So we want to keep that dryness to the potato when we're making gnocchi because we eventually have to make a dough out of it. So the best way to do that is to bake it. I just so happen to magically bake this potato in 30 seconds. But inside, now you can see how flaky the potato actually comes out. These little flakes of potato, and it's not holding its texture whatsoever. But we don't want that, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna pass this through what's called a ricer. Has anybody ever used a ricer here before? Just raise your hands. Potato ricer? Okay, so we're getting rid of these peels. Actually, my girlfriend, Sarah, she's in the front row right there, she was making a Puerto Rican dish, something with potatoes, where you make like a dough and then you stuff it with meat. And she couldn't figure out a way whether to use a potato masher, or whether to use her hands, or whether to use a blender, so I recommended her to get this ricer. Now if anybody's ever used a garlic press, same idea, bigger version. The reason why it's called a ricer is because each one of these holes is the size of a grain of rice. So we're gonna put the potato into there, and we're gonna take it and turn it from anything that resembles a potato into basically like the start of our mix. So it's gonna end up looking almost like flour, wet flour.
Question.
All right. So that being done, you can see how it completely broke down this potato into nothing. It's almost like a powder. Now, my ratio for my gnocchi is 1 potato, 1 egg, 1 cup of flour, and that's it. Today, we are using buckwheat flour, but I'm only using 3/4 buckwheat flour and 1/4 I'm using all-purpose flour because I want some of that gluten from the buckwheat flour. Doesn't really have that much gluten in it. So I want some of the gluten from the all-purpose flour because that's what's going to hold it together. So I'm going to put in my flour there. I'm going to leave a little bit behind. I had a little bit extra, and I'm going to crack 1 egg into it. The whole egg, yolk and everything. Now what you're going to see as we start to process this. Can everybody see that? Yay! As we
Could you use the rice flour and then make it gluten-free? So rice and
You know, you could use rice flour. You would have to play with it. You can use cornstarch with your potatoes instead of flour. That would still be gluten-free. There's tiny trace amounts of gluten in cornstarch, so I don't want to hurt anybody. But you could use rice flour. I never have, and you would definitely have to play with the ratio because I couldn't really tell you, how it would hold up, and then when it hits the water, if it would continue to hold up. So you can sit there forever with a spoon and do that if you want to, but I'm just going to get in there with my hand. You can take this and put it down on your table and mix it on your table. You ever seen like the old Italian grand ladies, how they make the little volcano and they put all the eggs on the inside of it? You could completely do that if you want to. I'm just doing this I would preferably do that, but this is just to keep the work surface clean because I don't have a lot of room to work up here. You can see it coming together now. So it's starting to form a dough. Now when it comes to gnocchi, once we get this dough together, I am going to roll it a certain way. But you don't have to roll it that way if you don't want to. You could lay it out with a rolling pin, cut it into squares. You could put it in a piping bag and make tubes and cut tubes. But I'm kind of going to roll it like you ever go to the mall and you see the pretzel place, how they roll out the pretzels. I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to chop it up into little dumplings. You could shape each individual dumpling by hand if you want to. But that's completely up to you. I know there's an Italian restaurant right next to the water tower place called Bartoma, and it's owned by Tony Montuano, which is a really good friend of our restaurant. And he also has a Michelin star. They shape each individual one that they have by hand. Okay, so now I have my gnocchi dough. This is it. You're ready to go. I'm gonna clean my hand off really quick, and then we're gonna roll it out. Now this is a pasta. Don't get me wrong, it's called a gnocchi, but it is a type of pasta.
Say again?
How long have
And
Him?
Yeah.
You mean his career?
yeah, somebody asked you a question.
Now.
You stop talking.
15 minutes.
You don't need to let it rest because of the gluten.
No, you don't need to let it rest. I mean, the gluten's there more of a binder than anything. Now, a normal dough, like a pie dough or something like that, you would want to give the gluten a chance to make it rise, but we don't want it to rise. We want these to be really dense and heavy, almost to the point where they're like chewy. Now, you can take each little piece, roll it in your hand like this, and you got a gnocchi right there. And you can do one of these at a time for 3 hours until you finish all this. Or what we like to do at the restaurant is we'll take a piece of it and we're gonna roll it out like this. Everybody can see that? So once this is rolled out, just gonna take our knife and cut our gnocchis. We're going to cook them all in the same water at the same temperature, so you kind of want to keep a same general size. That way they're all going to cook at the same time. Now you're going to want to take some really salted water. So you notice we didn't put any salt in that whatsoever, because we're going to put it in salted water, and what we like to call it at the restaurant is salty like the sea. So if you've ever been to the ocean, all the way to the point where you can definitely taste the salt in the water. Now I already brought the water up to a boil and I already salted it, so we're gonna put that on there. It's boiling, and we're just gonna put the gnocchis straight into the water, one piece at a time. All we're doing is we're gonna wait for them to float. After they float, we're gonna count to like 30, and then they're gonna be done. Now you can do a whole bunch of these on a Thursday night when you got nothing to do. Make a big batch. Take what you have for dinner, cook them all, and then freeze the rest. They will hold in your freezer frozen indefinitely. So whenever you feel like it, put it in a little pint Ziploc bag or something like that and throw 5 or 6 of them in your freezer and be like, hey, you want to have gnocchi tonight? Go grab it back out of the freezer. Because if you go to the grocery store and you go to the freezer section, Mariano's has frozen gnocchi in their freezer section. So they can't be doing it wrong because it's Mariano's, the best grocery store in the world, right? Okay, so we got our gnocchi going. See this little guy that I cut right here? I cut him a little too small, and that one's already floating. We can take it out, and it's done. Nice, chewy, bouncy consistency. Really good. Just enough salt because it's soaked in that salt from the water. We didn't have to salt it ourselves. It's so porous and it's flour and it's pasta that it needs that water, and it just sucks it right in. You can see them all starting to come up to the top and float. And I'm going to set myself up with a little spot to put them once I take them out. So now the ingredients for the sauce. We get our pans hot back here.
Chef, we have a question.
Go ahead.
Chef, do we have to cook the gnocchi before we freeze it, or can we freeze them?
I did say you want to cook them all.
You have to cook them first.
You definitely need to cook it first, because if you don't cook it first, you put it in the freezer, you take it out, then the water from the cooking isn't going to be inside the gnocchi already, and it's just not going to work. You know, like the guy said before, rule of thumb, cook it before you put it in the freezer. I can't tell you the science of it, but if you froze it before, like if you ever frozen sour cream, it doesn't come back out the same way. So you definitely want to cook it first. Once it's completely cooked, then you can freeze it. All right, all our gnocchis are floating to the top now, so we're going to get these guys out of here, and we're going to start talking about what we're going to put in with them. Because you have to understand, these gnocchis are pasta. They're a flavor vehicle. It's just a vehicle for flavor. It's just going to take the seasonings and the sauce and everything else that we have and soak it up and just be there like a little sponge for the sauce and everything else. So we're definitely going to have to do something that we're not just eating little balls of flour. So what we're going to do there is we're going to take 3 different mushrooms. I have 3 different mushrooms today. I have chanterelle mushrooms. They're golden chanterelle mushrooms. They're one of the top 3 funguses considered to eat. The first one would be, anybody? What's that? Truffles, you got it. Second one is morel mushrooms, and third one is chanterelle mushrooms. Chanterelle mushrooms are called chanterelle mushrooms or golden chanterelle mushrooms. You'll find out why I told you that in a second. These are shimeji mushrooms. These are a Japanese mushroom. In Japan, they're obviously called shimeji. When they're white, these are han shimejis because they're brown. That's an organic product, really, really good. These you cannot eat raw. They're very, very bitter. It's not a mushroom for salad or anything like that. But the very second you apply heat to it and start to cook it down, all the bitterness goes away and it becomes another one of those flavors. Does anybody know the term umami? Okay, umami is a Japanese word. Not sure of the exact definition, but it is the 6th flavor. It's a meaty flavor. It's a flavor that is hard to describe. It's not salty, it's not sweet, it's not sour, it's not tangy. It's just a flavor that feels full. A flavor that when you taste it, you feel it. It's not easy to describe. One of the easiest ways to describe it is if you've ever had food with MSG and if you've ever had food without MSG. Now the food without MSG tastes delicious, but when you eat the same dish with MSG in it, whether it naturally occurs like this or naturally occurs with something like a tomato, which nobody really knows but has very high quantities of the same chemical that's in MSG, when you taste that, there's just something else there that convinces you that it's that much better than it was before. So that's the shimeji mushroom. And then this is why I told you the 2 simple names of these, because this is, and let me get out my list here, I wrote a list. So this is the king trumpet mushroom, the trumpet oyster mushroom, the king oyster mushroom, the trumpet royale, the French horn, or the cordoncello in Italian. We call them trumpets at work. It's a big, meaty mushroom, not very much flavor itself, pretty similar to a white mushroom, but it lends itself really good to just about anything, and especially because you can slice it this way, you can slice it that way, you can take it like this, and you can oblique cut it. You can do so much just because it's a big round cylinder. There's so much to work with. It's so much funner than, what are you gonna do with this? This tastes really good, but all I can really do is cut this in half. So the taste is exciting, but as far as like preparing it or adding it to a sauce or a dish or something like that, there's really not much going there. As far as those chanterelles go, I'm leaving those whole. And as far as the shimejis, if you notice when I took it, I cut it, They grow, they send them to you with the roots all still intact. So, but I'm just gonna leave those whole too, because those are gonna shrink down, they're gonna be really good. We can put all these mushrooms in our pan at the same time, and we're gonna worry about that later. Anybody know what this is? This is a fava bean pod, okay? You can see, you can find fava beans in cans anywhere. You can find dried fava beans in cans anywhere. A specialty grocer like Mariano's would probably have fresh fava beans. The pain in the butt part about fava beans is you gotta peel them 3 times. Once you have to take them out of their little shell, like a pea pod, okay? These are also called, and I don't wanna gross you out in a cooking show, but these are also called tick beans, okay? Because I have to drop them in here because I have to peel them one more time. So I gotta put them in the hot water, let them cook for 45 seconds, maybe 60 seconds, then there's gonna be another piece of skin that I'm gonna take off of it. Then when I take that piece of skin off, you're gonna see a little face, and you're gonna see a swollen back, and you're gonna realize why they call them tick beans. I also have peas, run-of-the-mill spring peas. You could buy them frozen, you could buy them fresh and peel them yourself. You can do whatever you want to do. Now keep in mind, what I'm making right here, you don't have to pick all the same stuff. Not by any means do you have to do that. You can put in regular white domestic mushrooms. You can put in any mushroom you find anywhere, except in your backyard. That might be dangerous. You'd have to get those checked out first. So we're just gonna start with a little bit of oil in the bottom of the pan. You can see my pan's already pretty hot. I had it getting hot back there. We want a hot pan. On that little side note, this is corn oil. Now people think Italian food, and I'm obviously making somewhat of an Italian dish right now. You might question, why aren't you using olive oil? Well, I'm using corn oil because it has a higher smoke point. I want it to be hotter. I really want to heat stuff up. I really want to sear it. And I'm also using corn oil because it doesn't impart any flavor. Corn oil has little or no flavor whatsoever. The smoke point of corn oil is about 450 degrees. The smoke point of olive oil is 350 degrees. So you can get this hotter. And by smoke point, I mean when it starts to smoke and it eventually catches on fire. Catching on fire, we do not want that to happen. So we're gonna put all 3 of our mushrooms in there, and we're just gonna let those start cooking down. We wanna give them some time. Like I said, the mushrooms are, especially the Shimeji mushrooms, a little bitter. You definitely wanna cook all that bitterness out of them, give them a chance to really lend their flavors to the dish. Now I'm gonna take our fava beans out, and I'm gonna show you. You can see the white skin comes off, and inside it, there's a little green fava bean, and you can see the little face with the nose and the swollen back. So it's a little hot, so let's let it cool off a bit before everybody gets a chance to look at it. I'm sorry I can't make it bigger. So,
Chef, we have a question.
question.
Yeah, I want to know if you did want to use olive oil, is it possible to use olive oil or will it burn you?
Definitely, definitely. You know what? You can use any olive oil you want. Talking about smoking points, you can use avocado oil, which is one of the highest smoking point oils you can get. It's 500 degrees. You basically can't set that stuff on fire. And when you think about the smoking point only being different, like 50 degrees, you're like, oh, that's no big deal, not that big of a deal. Think about when it's 50 outside, think about when it's 100 outside. That's kind of a big deal, right? That's shorts and a t-shirt versus a winter jacket. So these are all coming down now. Now that I got my mushrooms down, I'm gonna add a little garlic and shallot, okay? I'm gonna cut this garlic really fast, because I didn't chop my garlic. I like to start mincing my garlic by laying my knife flat down on top of it and smash it. See, it's almost done. Now you can sit there, you can cut it this way, cut it this way, cut it this way, do this one, but I like to start and I'll just smash it. That you can release all the oils in the garlic, you can get everything coming out there really easy without having to chop it up. Basically, why we mince stuff like garlic and shallot is because we want to expose as much of the inside as we can, because that's the only thing that's going to get the flavor in there for us. If you just put a whole piece of garlic in there, it's got to cook forever. I'm going to go take this back to the back burner real quick because the wind's cooling this off. If you're wondering why I'm hiding it from you, I'm not really trying to. So that's going to go back to the back burner for a second. And I already have some fava beans that I already cooked and blanched and peeled 3 times. So I'm going to put those back in there too. And I'm gonna put a little bit of peas back in there. You know, if you would have told me, 15 years ago before I started cooking that I would actually enjoy eating all these weird things, I would have called you a liar. Reminds me of a story. Anyway, this is my mother right here in case nobody noticed. Give her a round of applause. So, we came home from school one day, and my mom, see, the reason why I cook is because I came home from school every day and there was dinner on the table, and my mom cooked it. And my mom did catering on the side, and I helped her. I cut my finger cleaning asparagus when I was 9. So I started cooking really early, and I've always enjoyed it. And we'd come home from school every day, and we'd have dinner. One day we came home, and there was pasta, and everybody loves pasta. We're an Italian family. Why don't we love pasta? But it was green. And we're like, well, do I want to eat green pasta? Like the guy that just made green pasta last show, if anybody was here? Do I really want to eat that? I'm 11. Like, that's weird. She's like, just try it, and then I'll tell you what's in it. So we tried it, and then she told us that it was made with spinach. And we're like, ugh, it's spinach, it's gross. And then she said, but did you like it? And of course we said yes, because it was delicious. And then, starting on that day, I like spinach. Now, there's probably a lot of foods that you guys would see and be like, nah, there's no way I'm eating that. But you're never gonna know if you like it unless you try it.
Right.
So I would recommend any single thing that you come across and you get a chance to eat it, and there's hundreds of them right here. The taste is open until 9 o'clock tonight. There's 100 opportunities to try something that you haven't had before that you might fall in love with, like spinach. All right, so now all my vegetables are heating up back there. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper before I put in my cream sauce. Now, by cream sauce, I mean just heavy cream, because I'm actually going to make the sauce in the pan. What time is it? Am I still doing good on time?
You are. You're the last show, so
All right.
You've got 20
I can just
minutes.
go forever?
Right.
All right.
Did you bring sleeping bags?
Who wants to stay all night? I'll keep cooking. All right. Heavy cream. Now, there is... Oh, it didn't close. I thought I got it. I'm bad. There is skim milk. How much fat is in skim milk? Can anybody tell me? None.
Good.
None.
None at
2% milk is 2% fat, of course. Whole milk? I don't know.
Lot of
Whatever.
fat.
Half and half is half heavy cream, half whole milk. Now, your normal heavy whipping cream is like 44% milk fat. You can buy them at the store in higher quantities of milk fat, but your typical everyday run-of-the-mill is going to be 44%. This isn't for coffee. This isn't for cereal. This is thick. This isn't even for milkshakes unless you make ice cream out of it first. So we're going to go ahead and get that in there. Not a lot, just enough to kind of coat the vegetables. You can go a little bit more than you think you should need, because what we're going to do is we're going to reduce it. Reduction means I'm going to take the water out of it. Now, it is fat and it is milk, but I'm going to take the water out of it. And what's going to happen when I take the water out of it is it's going to thicken up, of course. So, I got my cream in there. Now I'm going to add Parmesan cheese. I'm adding the Parmesan cheese right now before it starts to reduce, because if I reduce it till it's almost cream and then I put the cheese in it, it's going to turn into paste. And I don't want that. So I want to be able to judge when my thickness is good. Now, like I said, these gnocchis are already cooked, right? We already cooked them. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put the gnocchis in there and let them cook in the cream. So while they're heating up in the cream, they're going to soak up those flavors, that garlic flavor, the flavor from the 3 different mushrooms, those really earthy flavors. I'm going to turn this, I'm going to crank this for a second, and then I'm going to bring it back over here so you guys can see it. But what I'm going to do now is I brought scallops. Now these scallops are from the East Coast. We actually use a seafood company based out of New York City. And what they do is they take our fresh seafood, we order it on Monday, they take it that morning, and they put it into a styrofoam cooler, fill it with ice. Then they put that, they take it directly to the airport. They go in the back door. They don't have to go through the metal detectors or anything like that. They go right in the back door. And they put it on a FedEx airplane. And then the FedEx airplane, there's a truck from Peerless Seafood Company waiting right there at the FedEx airplane. They take out our container, they put it in the back of his truck, and he brings it to us. So we get our seafood delivered by air, which is pretty cool. A lot of local vendors have great seafood too. We just choose to use them. Now these are what's called a dayboat scallop. Now what the word dayboat means is that you obviously have to go out and go fishing for scallops. Now you don't go fishing with a line. Usually what they'll do is they'll drag nets, or they'll even send divers down. Diver scallops are even more expensive because they get to go down there and choose, the perfect scallops, and they take those scallops back up, and those scallops are ungodly expensive. But these are kind of really good. Now what can happen is there are boats that go out to go shopping for scallops, or fishing, or whatever you want to call it, and they will stay out there. And they'll take their time. They'll stay out there 2, 3, 4 days, 5 days, and just stay out there. And they have big, gigantic freezers in the bottom of their boats. And as they catch the scallops, they'll just keep them. They'll take them down there, and they'll keep them. What dayboat scallop means is that they go out one time. They catch the scallops. Sorry, I can't get that working. I'm going to put it back here. They catch the scallops and they bring them back. They process them the same day. So it's obviously a fresher product. It's only moved one time. So whereas if it's out there, they got on the boat, they put more on top of it, and so on and so forth, and they just leave them there. So by the time they get back to shore, that scallop could be 3, 4, 5 days old already, and it's just not the freshest you can get. By buying dayboat scallops, you're getting the freshest possible scallop you can get. It's only taken 1 or 2 steps to get to you. It hasn't sat out at sea all day. Now this is just black pepper. This isn't pepper bought already crushed. You can use pepper already crushed if you're preparing something like a stew or a sauce, to something that's going to cook longer, to give that pepper the opportunity to release. It's going to pull in hydration, and when it pulls in the hydration, it's going to release its flavor. Or you can just instantly release the flavor by either cracking the pepper directly on top of it, or if you don't have that opportunity, like I didn't have a pepper cracker today, so I cracked it before I got here with a little spice mill or a little coffee grinder at home. So another thing about these scallops is these are what's called a U10 scallop. Now that means that this scallop right here, 10 of these would make up a pound or less. So under 10, U means under, 10 is the number, under 10 of these would make a pound of scallops. Now if you think about a pound being 16 ounces, this is about 1.5 ounces to a 2 ounce scallop. So those are big and meaty. They're going to have a lot of moisture in them. And if you ever buy frozen scallops, that's okay. You could buy frozen scallops. Don't thaw them under water, because inside that scallop is all that salty seawater. The reason why you eat seafood in the first place is inside the fish. It's in the water that lives inside the fish. Now some fishes have different flavors, but that reason why you really like seafood is the fact that there's salt water inside of it. I guarantee you, take a piece of fish home, let it sit in water for 15 minutes, and then cook it. You're not gonna like it. All that salt water is gonna get pushed out of it. So these guys literally have never been frozen, and I don't store them in water or anything like that. I'm also only gonna cook them probably about 30 seconds on each side. If I cook them for very much longer than that, they are going to dry out. If the heat's going to push out all those water, and just like anything else you have, it's just going to dry out. And you can see that's really hot. It's really smoky. The sugars inside, anything that has calories in it has sugar in it. And when you apply heat to sugar, right, it turns to caramel. So caramelization actually happens from the sugars in something cooking. When you grill a piece of meat and you get the grill marks on it, or if you're searing a scallop like this, you're going to notice that when I flip this guy over, how nice and brown that is. These guys have a really nice sugar content. They caramelize real nice. They're going to have a crunchy outside and a nice sea flavor saltiness on the inside. The texture is going to be really good, not rubbery. If you cook a scallop for too long, it tends to get really, really rubbery, and that's not going to be good for us either. So we're almost done. Now, somebody asked a question last show. to the French chef that was before me, and no disrespect to him by any means, but somebody said, well, why don't you put cheese on seafood? My answer to that question would be, why don't you? You know, I'm gonna serve scallops with a Parmesan cream sauce. Now, I guess I'm not melting it directly on top of it, but why not? You got people doing crazy stuff. You got people using nitrous oxide to cook steaks by freezing them to the point where the proteins coagulate. Well, why couldn't we use fish on seafood? But he does have a point about the rule of thumb, and nobody really likes seafood with cheese. These are done. Just that. Don't have to put them in the oven to finish them. Don't have to do anything. So here's our sauce back here. Gonna bring it back up to the front. See how it's nice and reduced? It's starting to get that cream sauce to it. Now that everything's cooked and our sauce is nice and reduced, I'm going to do the most important part. The most important part to any cooking whatsoever, and that's not eat it.
Taste it.
That's taste it. I have this little thing called a palette knife, and you've seen people use these for making sandwiches or spreading frosting, something like that. We use these at work to flip little things over, but mainly we use it at work to taste. Just enough. You're not eating, you're tasting. I'll answer that question.
Yeah. Well, if somebody wants to sample your food, what restaurant?
It's Takashi. There's cards right there.
Oh,
Takashi restaurant.
Right.
All right.
You're very well spoken. You
Thank
really
you.
explain everything.
Thank you.
That's why nobody
So,
asks you no questions. You
I'm
really
going to add a little bit more salt,
well-spoken.
a little bit more pepper, and then I'm going to use the magical thing that we like to call butter. It's already soft because it's been out here in this 90-degree weather.
Oh,
Then
my God.
I have parsley and chive. Parsley and chive, just herbs. You know, half the time we put this in stuff just to say it's in there. Give it a little bit of color. It doesn't impart too much flavor on itself. Then we're going to go ahead and give this our final little toss and our final little taste. A lot of nice colors. Smells delicious. Too bad you guys can't come up here and smell it. I'm making a
Smell it
mess.
from here. The fan
All right,
ain't blowing, but
one
I
more
can smell it. It
taste.
smells great.
You always want to taste, adjust, season, taste. Taste. T-A-S-T-E. Taste. Adjust, season, taste, enjoy. Right?
All right.
I just made that up right now. That is an absolute lie. There's a poster of that at the After School Matters culinary program that I've taught at a couple of times, and people say it all the time. So we're going to come through here. We're going to set this up like you'd be serving it to your guests. We're going to spread this out, make it look really nice. Make sure you get all that good cream sauce.
Oh, so you teach also?
No, I do.
Wipe off our plate a little bit better here. Then we're going to take these scallops. When you cook for 14 years, and my girlfriend is always impressed by this, when you cook for 14 years, you can do amazing things like this. Grab hot food with your bare hands. Now, I did wash my hands twice, and I do have a rag with sanitation solution back there. So my hands are clean. So we can arrange these. Speaking of which, did you know that on the process of a Food Network program, like Emerald or Bobby Flay or anything like that, there's a minimum of, I think it's 30 food service and sanitation infractions committed every show. Because it's just on TV, you know, it's not a restaurant. So we have scallops we have seared Daybone scallops with soba, aka buckwheat gnocchi, fava beans, chanterelle mushrooms, spring peas, and Parmesan cream sauce.
Yay!
Questions?
Did everybody see that?
Any questions out there before we say goodbye for the year? Yes.
Shimeji. Shimeji or white beach. They do have them at Mariano's.
Chef, I don't suppose you brought us a recipe.
I did not bring a recipe.
but you'll get it to us and we'll put it on the Taste website next week.
Sounds good?
Sound good to you guys?
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for filling in. That was most enjoyable.
Thank you. I
Maybe
enjoyed
next
it.
year.
Just in case you guys didn't know, this is my first time ever doing this in public.
Yeah.
So,
You great.
thanks for being here.
I think
We
you
don't
got
believe
your
it.
own
I don't
cooking
believe
show.
it.
Yes,
In a couple of years when I'm on TV, you'll be like, I saw that guy do it for the
That's
first
what I
time.
just said. I wish
Okay,
you
I'm
was on
totally
your own
honest.
TV show.
I have taught classes before. I've done like for the after school matters, but those are just teenagers, teenagers. And I've done a couple like small private things for churches. But as far as ever doing it in public, this was time number one. So thanks for being here.
Thank you, audience. You've been great this year. And we will hopefully see you all next year for the Taste of
By the
Chicago.
way, before anybody leaves, you and you, come here.
Go.
This is Cadence Hafer and Isabella Hafer, and these are the loves of my life, and these are one of the reasons why. These are my daughters. So, and you guys get to try the food. So, and the sound guy gets to try the food too. Let's hear it for the sound guy.
Don't forget,
Thank you.
Mom. What about Mom?
There are cards and some flyers up in the front. There's a menu if you want to look